it's Angie from Canterbury Trails Farm. Today I'm going to talk to you and show you how to make a toothbrush rag rug. This is also sometimes called an Amish rag rug. The reason why it's called a toothbrush rag rug is because originally they were made with like the handles of toothbrushes. Toothbrushes used to be made out of wood for the most part and also bone, and they usually had a hole at the end to hang on a hook. Somewhere along the line someone figured out how to make sort of like a needle out of probably an old handle, and you can buy, this is actually a toothbrush that I have cut, a cheap toothbrush I cut and made in my own, but you can actually buy wood ones, and I have another bigger plastic one to do this craft with. This is actually so simple. Once I started making these, I really hate making braided rugs now, but making a toothbrush rag rug goes so fast. If you've watched my video, any of my videos involving blanket stitching, essentially what you're using to do this rug with is a blanket stitch. You're going to make a loop and pull it up through the loop. And if you watched my video on edging pillowcases, doing a faux crochet edge, it's almost the same technique. You're going to use the blanket stitching, and you're going to go through each loop of the rug and it's just forming a chain all the way around. So to begin with, I'm going to show you, and here's the great thing. I am not a stickler on my widths, and sometimes my rags aren't even cut straight. I mean, here you go. This one is a mess. Basically for me, if they're essentially a strip, I'll use it. When it gets braided into your, or sewn into your rug, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's all going to be squished in there. Really, the wider will make a thicker, and if you're looking at my rug, see, I've got a bunch of, I have like sari ribbon I'm trying to use up. I have a lot of t-shirt ribbon that I'm also going to be trying to use up, that I started using for a lot of projects, and I just haven't used it for a while, so I just need to use some of that stuff up because it's just sitting in basket. So how do you start? Let's start one first. First thing you want to do to start with is you're going to make, some people make 4 loops. You just sort of hold in the loops together. So start with like 2 loops. Try to make them uniform here. Okay. I'm just going to sew sort of through those 2 loops next to it. Just sew through that one. 2 loops. Make a 3rd loop. And now make a 4th loop. And sew through it. Okay, so I have like, it almost looks like a little bow. Alright, and I'm just going to okay, so I have sewn my 4 loops. I have put my end in my toothbrush, and I think this is about 3.5 inches long. It doesn't really matter. It's just, you know, your comfort. And I've sort of rounded the end of mine. You can, like I said, you can go on Amazon or other places and just search toothbrush rag rug. So we've got this loop, right? Alright, now remember, if you've watched the videos on blanket stitch, that's great. If you haven't, I'm going to sort of show you. So you've got your loop, and I've got my fingers in my loop here. Alright, I'm going to take my strip, and I'm going to form a loop. I'm going to take my toothbrush thing, I'm going to put it down into the loop, one of those sewn loops. And I'm going to pull. See, notice I have a loop here. I'm going to pull my strip with my strip coming out of it. See it? And I'm going to keep pulling. Now you don't want to pull too tight because it will start to make your loops pucker. Now I want to go to that second one that I sewed together. And I'm making my loop, pulling it through. Just sort of, in the beginning stages, you just sort of have to work with it and mold it. Now I've got my third little loop that I've made over here. I'm going to do it again. Make a loop out of your strip. Put your tool down into the the third loop that we've made. Remember, we made like 4 little loops, sort of like a flower we sewed together. I would say it takes the longest to start it than it does to actually work on it, because when you're starting it, you're really trying to keep things even there. Okay, now we're on our 4th little flower loop thing that we sewed. And I am making my thing. Now you can see it's going around. Now, go back in this loop. Back over to this next. This is actually, now we are making loops on the loops that we've already sewed. All right, so now here's the last one that we've, it wasn't one of the original 4. Now we're on our 2nd row, so we're just looping around. So basically you just sort of feel it out, find a loop as you turn your little rosette around. There's another loop. See, it's starting to get bigger. All right, now let's stop for a minute and let's look. How are we going to join our fabric together? So here's the end. So here's how you do it. You can tie a knot if you want to, but this is so much better because you won't have a knot. So I'm just going to cut a little like a little slash a little bit away from my end. And then I am going to cut a little slash on the end of the new fabric I want to use. I'm going to put this through the hole. So here's one slash, and now the fabric is in the other slash. I'm going to take the end that doesn't have a slash of the new piece of fabric, and I'm going to poke it through the hole. I'm going to pull it through, and it's going to join my fabrics. Okay, and I'm going to put this back into my little needle utensil thing. And here we go. We're going to go back around. We're going to make a loop. I'm going to pull it through. And that next loop. So what you're doing is you're going around. See, I'm just going around and finding the next loop that I made. And in the middle, try not to get too tight because the middle has a tendency to want to pucker. Sometimes you'll also find that if your loop was larger, maybe you need to do 2 stitches in one loop just to sort of even it out. or make a longer, don't make it so tight, make a longer loop there. Your strips can be as long as you want to make them. Here's an idea, and here's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be making longer length ones, and this might sound really crazy, but I made a rag rug and I put it down on the inside of my greenhouse because I had weeds coming up and I didn't want the weeds there. Now I have the fabric in there. Actually, it's been there for about 3 years. And so it's slowly deteriorating the fabric, but since it's I mostly use cotton and cotton blends, it's natural. It's all natural. So the cotton will eventually just decompose, basically, and will break down, and it'll rot, and essentially it'll return to fibers, and when it's done, and I'll just throw it in the compost heap. But so, there's different ways to keep down weeds. But my thought is, if I have enough rags, big garden at the farm, where there's along the fence line, there's a lot of weeds. So I'm thinking I'm going to do long ones. I'm just going to put those down wherever I want, like a little pathway. And I know everyone's seen they make that out of like rolled up mulch and hay and stuff like that. It comes in rolls, and you can put that in between the rows of your gardens, but that costs money. So for me, I'm thinking since it worked so well in my greenhouse, I think I'm going to make long rows, and I'm going to put those down in my garden, and I'm just going to leave them where I don't want any weeds, because it kills the weeds underneath. And they also make good throw rugs. You can make placemats. You can make table covers. You can make like a doilies. You could just make rugs, different size rugs. So, and you can also make pillow covers. You can make like a square or a circle or whatever shape you want, and back it with fabric inside out, just like you would a pillow. And you're probably gonna have to sew it by hand, and then turn it right back, side about, and you have like a decorative sort of country looking pillow. So here I am just going around, and this is a fatter piece of cloth, so these loops are going to be a little fatter here. But you can see how fast it reaches, it starts getting, adding some size to it. And I'm just going around, and I'm just making a blanket stitch in every loop, just around and around. So that's a start. So it looks sort of sloppy, but as you can see, it's starting to get tighter in the middle. And so I'm just going to stop there because I don't actually want to make another one right now. So that's the start. So when you get to this size, so this one is going to be for the kitchen area, just to put under the table, the little house. Just I like to be barefoot, and that linoleum is pretty grody. And so I thought, well, this would be nice just to have a little bit of a carpet in there. So you join it. I'm joining it again here. If anybody watched my garden bunting sewing video, then you recognize some of this fabric, and that's what some of these are, scraps from that project. There you go. That's a good join. The other one was so if you pull it, you get a good join like that. The other one I didn't really pull it tight enough, I don't think. Here we go. So on a bigger piece, you can start seeing. So I would stick to cotton, really. I mean, you can use anything you want. But cotton's gonna hold up the best. And like I said, you can see how fast it starts going once you get those, once you get the initial sort of frame, so to speak, established, whatever shape you're going to do. And if you find it's getting too tight, just pull it. It's sort of like a weave, you know, like a waffle weave here, because it's just rows of chains. Just pull it sort of looser and work with it. You can see the brown there. And it just starts adding, it's just loop after loop after loop is all it is. And that's all there is to it. It really does make a rug really quick, especially in rectangles or squares. When you sew your four, you know, when we started and we had sort of like the 4 flower petals, you want to work with that to keep it square. So it's just a matter of, you know, looking at it and thinking, okay, if I want this to be square, I need to add maybe another loops on the corner. Maybe you just look at it and you're just working it. And then once you get that base started and it looks pretty square, you can start working the loops around it more square. Same thing if you're doing like a oval. It all's going to come down to that center piece. And if you look in this one, it's a round center piece, and I wove this middle probably tighter than I should have on this one, so it made a little bit of a buckling. So remember to try to keep it a little loose. Like this one was looser, and so that gave me a little bit more play with it. If I looked like it was buckling, I could make it, you know, do the loops a little bit looser so it will lay flat. But if your middle raises up a little bit, that's a common problem with any kind of rag rug, especially if you're doing braided rag rugs, is to not get that center so tight that it almost becomes like a basket. So if you see that happening, loosen up on your loops, and maybe you might throw a few extra loops, like instead of doing 1 loop on top of the loop, like instead of just sewing 1 loop through this one, maybe you add 2, and then, you know, same thing until it looks like you've added some extra length. You want each row has to be wider than the other. The looser it is, it's not going to pull. It's not going to pull your fabric in to make that round sort of basket thing in the middle. I will say I find squares really difficult. And that's because you do have to really work with it. You really do have to build that square thing. Now, one trick I've used in the past with braided rugs, I've never actually made a square rug with the toothbrush just because I don't like squares. But is you can take pipe cleaners and when you get to, I don't know, a square about this big, run the pipe cleaners through the braid. It just sort of gives it like a little, like a framework. And later on you can take those pipe cleaners out. But it will help hold it into a square while you're working. When you're doing braided rugs, you have to make your braids, and then you have to sew your braids along. And the sewing of the braids is where you start getting that basket kind of center rising up on you, and as it tightens. So keeping it square with something like cleaners is a sort of a cheat kind of thing you can do. You could probably use that in the round one if you feel, but the round, like I said, if you just keep working with it, just like sort of like if you were using bread dough or Play-Doh, you know, so how you work around and smash it. That's all you need to sort of do with center. The goal is to keep it as flat as possible, not pull it in. Better to be too loose than too tight. The too loose, if you got done and you saw like this has like holes and stuff, you could always go cheat and even sew, like if it bothered you, you could sew just little stitches right in there too. But odds are, even if it's a little loose, when you start walking on it and everything, the fabric is going to get mashed down, and eventually it's all going to sort of fill out. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can see I have all different kinds of fabrics, and I'm not doing any kind of pattern. You can do all kinds. You could do white, purple, white, purple, white, purple, you know, whatever kind of colors you want. But this is strictly, I am using scraps. So this is an old craft, and I hope I've shown you a way to make rugs a lot easier than braiding it and making all that braid and then sewing all the braids together. This is just thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you later here at Canterbury Trails Farm. Bye.